aliens, monsters, and the supernatural. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Mac and Creeps, and this is the next chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, this particular chapter is a series of honorable mentions and things that are beyond the realm of thinking extraterrestrial. And then later on in the chapter is a very large portion where I talk about my first proof, the first time I ever seen tangible evidence to show people that I was experiencing these things. So I will be cutting this chapter in two, and I will be doing the honorable mentions on this video and talking about those experiences. And then I'm pretty sure the next part of the chapter will take up an entire video. So here we go. Not all events in my life have had a direct connection to aliens. Although extraterrestrial activity definitely tips the scales, you have read for yourself that I have experienced the supernatural, or you might even call it spiritual. Before we get too far along in my life of alien torment, I must take the time to tell you about a couple more significant events that had no explanation in the scientific world. It was another late night for me. I had grown somewhat obsessed with the pop culture craze of Pokemon. I had some generic Pokemon figurines, and I was playing with them in my room. I was thinking about how cool it would be if Pokemon were real. I thought about all of my favorite Pokemon, and for a split second, I joked to myself, I would sell my soul for these things to be real. That's the last thing I remember before going to bed. I wake up a few hours later. I am awake, but frozen in place. Dread washes over me. I can tell it's early morning hours by seeing the blue light through my blinds. I am surprised the aliens are coming with daylight moments away. I'm expecting them to pop around the corner of my doorway at any moment. But instead of aliens, a black fog starts to build in the corner of my room. The fog turns into a pillar of black smoke. I see a very large, shiny sickle blade start to take shape next to the pillar of smoke. The smoke pillar takes the form of a cloaked Grim Reaper. There is a deep darkness within the hood. I cannot see any eyes or facial features. My head is buzzing and vibrating. I look at the silver sickle again the Reaper is holding. The handle is black. The blade has an edge that resembles a circular saw blade. It must be almost 5 feet in length. The Reaper stands by my window, towering to the ceiling. Its blade almost scraping the ceiling as it sways methodically side to side. I am still frozen in the position I woke up in. All I can move is my head. I am somehow reminded of my comments hours earlier about selling my soul. The Reaper takes a step towards me. I sense him inquiring if I am still interested in the selling of my soul. I could scream if I wanted to, but instead I cry out for Jesus. I plead for him to save me. Please, Jesus, help me. Help me, Jesus. I cry out. Before I can say the words again, a sphere of yellow light comes through my window. The sphere is the size of a soccer ball. It is shining such a bright yellow. It seems like it is a tiny sun. The ball of light enters the Grim Reaper. The Reaper curls up from the blow. Beams of light protrude from inside his cloak. It starts with a few beams and quickly turns into hundreds of beams, until finally there's nothing left but the ball of light. Regaining my movement, I raise up in bed. I look at the light and wonder why it's not blinding me. The light gives me a sort of nod, then darts out my window. I jump out of bed and run to my parents' room. I sleep the rest of the morning in their floor. And now I know that selling your soul is not something to joke about. That was the first and last time I would ever joke about the subject. My mother spent some time in the hospital. During those nights she was in the hospital, my brother Rob and I were worried about her, and we would end up getting into bed with our father a few nights. I would crawl into bed on my mother's side, and Rob would sleep at the foot of the bed in the middle. One of these nights, I laid in the bed awake, and I seen a species of alien I had never seen before. They were floating outside the bedroom windows. They were humanoid, and their bodies were glowing a golden yellow color. They seemed to be their own light source. These entities had slightly oversized heads. Their eyes were not huge, but they were a decent size, and a very bright blue. They playfully passed back and forth across the windows. They waved at me and smiled. Their faces were definitely alien, but for whatever reason, I was not afraid. After about 15 minutes of them playing around outside, they waved one last time and floated away. That was the only time I had ever seen them. Another night, Rob and I slept in our parents' room. I woke up to hearing Rob choking. I looked down at him. I saw a greenish reptilian-like hand with fingers and a thumb. The hand had pointed claws and was coming up from the foot of the bed. The freakish hand would cover Rob's mouth, and he would begin to stop breathing. I was terrified and tried waking my father. When I would say, "Dad," the hand would disappear over the edge of the bed. After a moment passed, I would see it come back up, starting the process again. The creepy hand would get almost to my brother's mouth, and I would blurt out, "Dad!" My dad finally became irritated with me and raised out of bed. "What's the matter with you?" he said. I honestly didn't know what to say. I knew it would sound crazy, so I didn't answer. After my dad decided to smoke a cigarette, I was feeling a little brave. I got up and checked the foot of the bed. I didn't see anything, but I woke up Rob and told him I was scared. I asked him if he would sleep next to me. Rob agreed, but he did think it was strange that I was the scared one, and I wanted him to sleep in the middle. When my mother returned home from the hospital, I slept a couple of nights next to her. We had rarely spent long stretches apart, so I had missed her very much. On the second night in her room, I would finally see what I had been hearing for so long. I am lying in bed, awake as usual. It's the middle of the night, and everyone in the house is asleep but me. The blinds in my parents' windows are up as usual. I am lying next to my mother, looking out the window. The window is at the foot of the bed and provides a very good view of the complex. It also provides a view of the whole street, and beyond the street is a steep hill. It goes straight up to a stop sign where you can either turn right or left. You cannot go straight because there is an 8-foot stone wall, and on the other side of the wall beyond the tree line is an isolated area. Woods and railroad tracks mostly. I am watching the sky above the tree lines. I see a small plane in the distance with its lights flashing. The plane suddenly starts to dive down into the forest beyond the stone wall. I raise up in bed, preparing myself for the plane crash I am about to witness. I can't believe this is happening in our small town. Before the plane vanishes behind the treetops, it comes to a stop. I am perplexed by this for a moment. Then I see the lights of the plane growing larger, and the lights are no longer blinking. I can see now that the plane is headed right towards us. As it gets close to the stone wall, I can make it out perfectly now. It's not a plane at all. For the first time, I understand why people say flying saucers look cigar-shaped. The craft looks like a cigar from my perspective. It has a point on both ends and a fat middle. Each point is lit up. The craft emits the sound of a car coming down the street as it glides over the apartments. It gets right to the window I am looking out, and before it gets over the roof, I can make out a humanoid silhouette within each light, as if there is a cockpit in each end of the cigar. The craft flies over us, rumbling the house. I know where they are going. With a frog in my throat, I wake my mother. Mom, I say. What is it, honey? I think I just seen a UFO. I whisper. Honey, it was probably a weather balloon. Yeah, it probably was. I really want to believe it was a weather balloon. Get some sleep, honey, okay? Okay. I take her advice and try to fall asleep as quick as possible. I know I don't want to be awake when they backtrack to the kitchen door. I take a few deep breaths and try to relax. I try to plead to the aliens telepathically, trying to convince them to give me time to fall asleep before they come. I do eventually fall asleep, and I don't remember anything after the craft passed overhead. These entities came without end. For years and years, I would wake up night after night to being experimented on. I remember waking up one night with all kinds of tubes in my neck and my back. After a moment of trying to get the tubes out, they suddenly started releasing with force. It sounded like compressed air being released as every tube came undone in a domino effect. There was not much light in the room that night, but I was able to see an entity put the tubes in a sort of briefcase and walk out of my room. A moment later, I was able to fully move again. So that's where I'm going to stop at for this video, and I kind of want to elaborate on the entity with the briefcase. I did not talk about this in my book because to me, I mean, obviously all of this stuff seems pretty unbelievable, but what I seen that night in my room to me seemed so unbelievable that I thought it would ruin my whole book by putting it in there. So that night, when I had whatever it was in my neck, and then I seen the entity with the briefcase, it was not an entity that I seen. I seen a man in a black suit with a hat on and some sort of sunglasses walk out of my room with the briefcase. So that's, I did not talk about that in my book because I was like, I mean, what is that? Is that Men in Black or what? Which, you know, I have a pretty good idea now what that is, but all of this is explained, you know, later in the book series. Yeah, that's what actually happened. It was essentially like a Man in Black is what was there that night with the briefcase, and I seen him. Just remember that I pretty much slept with my lights on all the time, so there wasn't like a lot of obscurity most of the time whenever I would see something. So it was very odd to me to watch this strange man walking out of my room. So yeah, I didn't put that in my book or talk about it. But the next video is really intriguing. It's my X-ray video when I went to the hospital and found some very surprising evidence. So definitely like and subscribe, and you don't want to miss the next one for sure. Thank you all for listening and watching. I'm very grateful. I hope you all have a good week, and I'll see you next time. This has been Mac and Creeps. You're listening to the story Aliens, Monsters, and the Supernatural, a true story of a terrorized life. Thank you.